Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Maverick Parties Riding Association for Moose Jaw Lake Center, Lanigan. My name is Craig Townsend. I'm the president of the association. I'm also the host of this video, the editor, the producer, tech support, and I upload these videos onto Facebook and YouTube. We're looking for more members, as well as people who have time to volunteer. And if you know anyone who is willing to start up a riding association and other riding in Saskatchewan, please let us know. There's contact information at the end of the video. Okay, today I want to talk about the carbon tax, what we've been saddled with and what we will be saddled with over the next few months. The first carbon tax came in on April 1st, 2019, and how many of you know that the federal government applies GST to the carbon tax? So that's a tax on a tax, but the carbon tax is due to increase every January until the federal government meets its Paris goals. To date, every jurisdiction globally that's tried this has run out of taxpayer money and credit long before ever coming close to their Paris targets. The only difference I can see with this plan is that it's our tax money they're playing with. So what can we expect? The carbon tax applies to fossil fuels across the board, gases, liquids, and solids, and the government plans to ramp up the old carbon tax from $30 a ton to $170 a ton by 2030, which translates to an estimated 37.5 cents per liter at the pump from about 6.5 cents now. What this means is that every item that is produced in Canada or transported through Canada will see its cost increase. This will drive up the cost of all associated services, which will drive up the cost of every service and product in Canada. So inflation is guaranteed, but we don't know to what degree. Now, the tax increase is a promise from the government of what they're going to do to Canadians, but there's also this promise of rebates, which is what the government says they will do for Canadians. Now, I've always found that politicians are far more giddy when they are doing something to you than when they are doing something for you. Maybe these guys are different. Let's have a look. So they say the government said it will continue to return most of the money collected by this program through rebates. Now, yeah, I can understand most of the money because all policies cost taxpayer dollars to administer, such as the Phoenix pay system that Trudeau implemented back in 2015. The public servants on that system should be getting a paycheck soon, after all the Liberals promised. So how much are these rebates? Ontario rebates are just over $2,000 per year, while Alberta is over $3,200 and Saskatchewan is over $3,800 per year. In fact, the rebates for Alberta and Saskatchewan are the highest in Canada. That's very generous of Ottawa to the ungrateful West. So why are Alberta and Saskatchewan getting such great treatment from the Liberals? First, it's a Liberal promise. Second, you get back what you pay in. So who's paying in the most? Third, to ensure that this policy is not cancelled over the next 10 years, we would have to re-elect the party that made the promise for 3 more terms. I'm not on board with that. We also have to trust that a situation doesn't arise in the next 10 years where the Liberals forget to pay us back, change their minds about raising this rebate, or just decide that there aren't enough votes in the West so they don't care. How many remember that this is the year that Trudeau promised that he would balance the budget? How many people also remember that these are the same people who in March of this year tried to pass a bill for the authority to tax, spend, and borrow without parliamentary approval? And if we have an election this spring, the government will have gone its full term with no budget, no oversight, and the largest deficit not just in Canadian history, but according to the International Monetary Fund, Canada has run the largest deficit of all countries this pandemic year. Now, this is based on GDP, so it's taxpayer dollars spent per citizen. Now, if the Liberals get a majority next election, the public will never know where this money has gone. This hall of shame is not just housing the Liberals. Opposition parties didn't do their job, and as a result, Canada's finances are being devastated. We may go bankrupt, be forced to leave the country and our families to find work, suffer greatly, but it's a sacrifice Ottawa is willing to make. So that's what Canadians get from this plan that's being imposed on us. But what does the world get? After all, we're sacrificing to save the planet, right? Climate is global. Our sacrifice should have some impact globally. Ottawa wouldn't impose this policy backed by the opposition if there wasn't some gain to be made, right? You can see from the article that Ottawa wants to reduce emissions from 732 megatons to 513 megatons. So how does this compare to other countries? In real terms, Ottawa wants us to reduce our emissions by 213 million tons per year by 2030. That means we're ramping up emissions reduction in a gradual process that will take about 10 to 12 years, just like when these same people pushed these same policies in Ontario. 12 years of green policies in Ontario ending in 2018 drove 10% of their manufacturing base out of Canada, which did lower their emissions locally and gave the Ontario Liberals a talking point, but it also destroyed their tax base and Ontario became a have-not province. So what happened to the manufacturing that Ontario lost? Has anyone noticed how many items are made in China these days? Green policies push industries to find other jurisdictions. So in China, from 2006 to 2016, emissions rose by 3,559 million tons, or an average of 355.9 million tons per year. Ottawa wants to reduce emissions by 213 million tons by 2030. So globally, emissions increased as manufacturing left Western countries that have emission standards for countries that don't have or don't care about emission standards. So what does the world get for our sacrifice? If you look at history, more emissions. There is no logic to pushing these green policies now if the goal is to reduce emissions and build a strong economy for Canadians. The people in Ottawa know that. They live in Ontario, which has the highest non-sovereign debt in the world, and their provincial utility company, Hydro One, has the highest corporate debt in the world due to these green policies. So if they know the outcome of these policies, my question is, what are they getting for our sacrifice? One last question. Do you think the federal government's carbon tax will work to lower Canada's emissions? You can see from this emissions pie chart that every number is a fuzzy estimate that they boil down to emissions per person, which is itself an estimate, and that estimate is 18.58 tons per person. Notice also that independent sites don't claim the West emits more than the East. They think of us as one country. Ottawa doesn't. So total emissions for Canada is calculated off of a set population. We should be able to reduce our emissions unless some oblivious administration opens Canada's borders up. Alright. Okay, let's sum up. The carbon tax is being applied unevenly between the provinces. The rebate shows that. Globally, every 2 years, China adds the equivalent of one Canada's emissions to itself, so our sacrifice to achieve a 30% reduction is pointless to the global climate. And the ginormous minds of Ottawa are sabotaging their own climate plan. Okay, so what's my position on the carbon tax? It's a complete farce. It's a lie being pushed to allow a minority government with no oversight to vastly increase taxes. This tax will not reduce emissions globally, only locally, and it'll do that by pushing Canadian manufacturing out of Canada to another jurisdiction where emissions will continue, just not in my backyard. The plan calls for phasing out our energy sector, but inexpensive energy is a cornerstone of a successful civilization. Before fossil fuels, humans used large mammals and slaves. Step 1 of the Liberal plan is to get rid of fossil fuels. Does anyone know what Trudeau has in mind for step 2? The plan will not produce plentiful, well-paying green jobs, but it'll definitely push many Canadians into bankruptcy or worse. It will cripple Canada's economy for generations and may make us too weak economically to fight off certain international powers who view Canada's resources as necessary for their future, but not Canadians. This is a minority government. Opposition parties can shut this ridiculousness down, but they refuse to do so. Even the Conservatives are on board with Canada meeting its Paris targets. What these people in Ottawa are doing is irresponsible beyond reason, and I can't sit by and let this happen. In the next video, I'll tell you about the Clean Fuel Standard, which is another carbon tax on top of this carbon tax. What do you want to bet GST is charged on that one too? Merry Christmas.